Neuroscience in education. Optimizing learning through brain-based strategies. What if the difference between students who struggle and students who thrive has less to do with motivation, intelligence, or effort, and more to do with how well teaching aligns with how the brain actually works? In classrooms, training rooms, and online learning spaces around the world, enormous effort goes into delivering content. Curricula are packed. Assessments are frequent. Standards are detailed. Yet understanding often remains fragile, retention remains shallow, and engagement fades faster than expected. This gap exists because teaching has historically focused on what to teach rather than how the brain learns. Neuroscience offers a different lens. It does not replace pedagogy. It sharpens it. It explains why certain strategies consistently work across contexts, ages, and disciplines, while others reliably fail, even when intentions are good. This keynote explores how insights from brain science directly inform instructional design, curriculum planning, and classroom practice. The focus is not theory for theory's sake. The focus is alignment, aligning teaching methods with the operating principles of human cognition. When instruction aligns with the brain, learning becomes more efficient, more durable, and more meaningful. Why the brain's operating system matters. Teaching is often treated as a transfer problem. Information moves from expert to learner. Neuroscience reframes this. Learning is not transfer. Learning is construction. The brain does not absorb information passively. It actively filters, organizes, and reconstructs input based on prior knowledge, attention, emotional state, and cognitive capacity. Understanding the brain's operating system, the rules that govern attention, memory, and learning, provides educators with leverage. It allows instructional choices to be made deliberately rather than intuitively. When instruction ignores these rules, learning becomes effortful and fragile. When instruction respects them, understanding stabilizes and performance improves. This is the foundation of brain-based learning. Neuroplasticity, the brain's capacity for change. One of the most important discoveries in modern neuroscience is neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to change its structure and function in response to experience. Learning physically alters neural networks. New connections form, existing pathways strengthen, and used connections weaken. This process is continuous. It occurs across the lifespan. It responds to challenge, feedback, and meaningful engagement. For educators, neuroplasticity reframes ability. Performance reflects experience and structure rather than fixed capacity. Curriculum design and instructional strategy shape how plasticity unfolds. Teaching does not merely reveal potential, it helps create it. Introducing brain-friendly learning. Brain-friendly learning refers to instructional environments that align with cognitive architecture. These environments respect limits, leverage strengths, and reduce unnecessary strain. They prioritize clarity over density, structure over overload, engagement over exposure. Brain-friendly learning does not simplify content. It optimizes conditions so learners can process complexity without cognitive collapse. This keynote explores how three core neuroscience principles, cognitive load, memory consolidation, and neuroplasticity, inform practical teaching strategies that improve learning outcomes. The cost of ignoring cognitive limits. Modern curricula often demand sustained attention across dense materials, rapid pacing, and layered tasks. These demands collide with the brain's limited processing bandwidth. Working memory can only hold a small amount of information at once. When instructional demands exceed that capacity, learners experience overload. Comprehension drops. Retention weakens. Motivation erodes. This is not a failure of effort. It is a predictable outcome of cognitive architecture. Neuroscience does not ask educators to lower standards. It asks them to manage load. Why understanding cognitive load changes everything. Cognitive load theory explains how mental effort is allocated during learning. Some load is inherent to the material itself. Some load supports understanding by encouraging meaningful processing. Other load distracts and interferes. Effective teaching minimizes unnecessary load so cognitive resources can be directed toward understanding. This distinction becomes powerful when applied intentionally to lesson design, assessments, and learning activities. Memory as a design outcome. Learning that disappears after assessment was never consolidated. Memory formation occurs in stages. Information must be attended to, encoded, stabilized, and revisited. Each stage depends on instructional timing and structure. Neuroscience shows that memory strengthens through retrieval, spacing, and elaboration. Exposure alone does not produce durable learning. When educators design for memory rather than coverage, retention improves naturally. Growth through structured challenge. Neuroplasticity responds most strongly to environments that combine challenge, novelty, and emotional relevance. Curricula that adapt to learner readiness promote engagement and confidence. Experiences that include feedback and achievable challenge strengthen self-efficacy. Growth mindset practices gain power when embedded structurally rather than delivered rhetorically. The brain changes most reliably when learning feels effortful yet achievable. Where this keynote is going. This session will move beyond abstract principles into application. We will examine how to manage cognitive load without diluting rigor. Design lessons that encode knowledge reliably. Structure curriculum to leverage neuroplasticity. Shift from content delivery to brain-aligned learning design. The goal is not to replace pedagogy with neuroscience. The goal is to inform pedagogy with evidence about how learning actually happens. By the end, educators will have practical strategies they can implement immediately and a framework for evaluating instructional decisions through a cognitive lens. Teaching to the brain changes outcomes. And that shift begins with understanding how learning truly works. Insight Section 1. Cognitive load, the brain's bandwidth limit. Let's talk about capacity. Every learner, no matter how motivated, no matter how capable, operates within a fixed cognitive bandwidth. The brain can only process a limited amount of information at any given moment. When that bandwidth is exceeded, learning slows. Then it fragments. Then it stops. This is the foundation of cognitive load theory. Working memory is the bottleneck. It is where thinking happens. It is where new information is held, compared, organized, and understood. And it fills up quickly. When instruction delivers too much information at once, the brain shifts from learning mode into survival mode. Attention narrows. Comprehension drops. Retention weakens. This happens silently. Learners may appear engaged. Notes may be taken. Slides may be followed. Yet understanding never stabilizes. The issue is not intelligence. The issue is load. Cognitive load theory distinguishes between different kinds of mental effort. Some effort is required to understand the material itself. Some effort strengthens learning by encouraging meaning-making. Other effort drains attention without contributing to understanding. Effective teaching protects cognitive bandwidth by reducing unnecessary demands. This is where small design choices matter. Clear visuals reduce visual processing load. Segmented tasks prevent overload. Simple instructions preserve working memory for thinking. When extraneous demands are reduced, learners can direct attention toward understanding rather than managing complexity. Managing load does not reduce rigor. It increases depth. Insight Section 2. Memory matters. Encoding for lasting knowledge. Learning that disappears was never stored. Memory does not form automatically when information is presented. It forms when information is processed in specific ways over time. Neuroscience describes memory formation as a multi-stage process. Information enters working memory. It is encoded through attention and meaning. It stabilizes through consolidation. It strengthens through retrieval. Each stage depends on instructional structure. When lessons rely on exposure alone, memory remains fragile. Familiarity increases. Confidence rises. Retention does not. Durable learning requires effortful processing. Spaced repetition strengthens memory by reactivating neural traces across time. Each reactivation reinforces the pathway. Retrieval practice strengthens memory by forcing the brain to reconstruct knowledge rather than recognize it. Elaboration deepens encoding by connecting new information to existing knowledge. These strategies work because they align with how memory systems operate. Educators who design activities that require recall, explanation, and application build memory intentionally. Quizzes become learning tools. Practice becomes reinforcement. Time becomes an ally rather than an enemy. When memory is designed for, retention follows. Insight Section 3, Neuroplasticity in Action, Curriculum Design for Growth. Learning changes the brain. Neuroplasticity explains how repeated experience reshapes neural networks. Connections strengthen with use. Pathways weaken without engagement. This process responds to challenge, novelty, and emotional relevance. Curricula that adapt to learner readiness activate plasticity more effectively. Tasks that stretch ability without overwhelming capacity promote engagement and confidence. Personalization does not require individualization at scale. It requires choice, pacing, and progression. Novelty stimulates attention. Challenge sustains effort. Positive emotional context strengthens encoding. When learners experience success after effort, self-efficacy increases. This belief shapes future engagement. The brain becomes more willing to invest effort. Growth mindset practices gain power when embedded structurally. Feedback, iteration, and visible progress reinforce the perception that ability develops through practice. Curriculum becomes a growth system rather than a sorting mechanism. Neuroplasticity reminds educators that learning environments shape learners over time. Instruction influences not only performance, but capacity. Designing for growth means designing for change. Insight Section 4, Actionable Classroom Strategies, Teaching to the Brain. Understanding the brain changes how instruction is designed. The question that matters most for educators is not whether neuroscience applies to learning. It is how to translate cognitive principles into daily practice in ways that are sustainable, measurable, and effective. Brain-based teaching begins with one assumption. Learning outcomes are shaped by instructional design more than learner traits. That assumption shifts responsibility from motivation alone to structure. Strategy 1. Design for cognitive simplicity. Cognitive load accumulates quickly. Every additional demand competes for limited working memory resources. Effective classrooms prioritize simplicity at the level of presentation. This means reducing visual clutter, limiting simultaneous instructions, and clarifying task goals before execution begins. Slides, worksheets, and digital platforms should guide attention rather than divide it. When learners know where to focus, cognitive energy is preserved for thinking. Clarity creates capacity. Strategy 2. Sequence for understanding. Instructional order matters. Concepts should be introduced in progressive layers, each building on what is already stabilized in memory. When prerequisite knowledge is secure, new material integrates more easily. Chunking content into coherent units allows working memory to process information without overload. Short instructional segments followed by processing time improve comprehension and retention. Sequencing transforms complexity into accessibility. Strategy 3. Build retrieval into instruction. Memory strengthens through use. Retrieval practice should be woven into lessons frequently and deliberately. Low-stakes questioning, brief recall prompts, and explanation tasks activate memory networks and reinforce learning. Retrieval works because it requires reconstruction. The act of pulling information from memory strengthens neural pathways more effectively than repeated exposure. Assessment becomes part of learning rather than a separate event. Strategy 4. Use time as a learning tool. Spacing matters. Learning improves when exposure is distributed across time rather than concentrated in a single session. Revisiting key concepts after delays strengthens consolidation and reduces forgetting. Educators can design curricula that return to central ideas repeatedly, each time with increasing depth and complexity. Time becomes a structural support rather than a constraint. Strategy 5. Design for emotional engagement. Emotion influences learning. Neuroscience shows that emotionally relevant experiences enhance attention and memory encoding. Interest, relevance, and perceived value increase cognitive investment. Instruction that connects material to meaningful contexts increases persistence. Positive emotional states support exploration and resilience. Classrooms that feel safe, challenging, and purposeful promote deeper engagement. Strategy 6. Calibrate challenge. Learning requires effort. The level of challenge determines whether effort produces growth. Tasks that are well calibrated activate neuroplastic change. Learners experience progress through manageable difficulty. Feedback guides adjustment. Clear success criteria and timely feedback strengthen confidence and self-efficacy. Growth emerges through structured challenge. Strategy 7. Encourage metacognitive awareness. Learning improves when learners understand how learning works. Explicit discussion of attention, memory, and effort helps learners regulate their own cognitive processes. Metacognitive prompts encourage planning, monitoring, and reflection. Students who understand why strategies work apply them more consistently. Instruction expands from content delivery to learning development. Strategy 8. Align technology with cognitive goals. Technology influences cognitive load. Digital tools should support focus rather than fragment it. Platforms that reduce distraction, support pacing, and encourage retrieval align more closely with brain-based principles. Intentional technology use preserves attention and reinforces learning goals. Tools become extensions of pedagogy, rather than competing systems. Strategy 9. Shift from coverage to consolidation. Learning quality depends on consolidation. Instructional planning benefits from prioritizing what learners should retain rather than how much material can be delivered. Time spent reinforcing core concepts produces stronger outcomes than rapid progression through content. Depth creates durability. Strategy 10. Observe, adjust, iterate. Brain-based teaching is iterative. Educators can monitor engagement, recall, and transfer to evaluate effectiveness. Instructional adjustments based on learner response refine alignment with cognitive principles. Teaching becomes a responsive system. Bringing the strategies together. These strategies work because they respect cognitive reality. They manage load, strengthen memory, and activate neuroplastic change. They shift instruction toward alignment with how learning actually occurs. Brain-based pedagogy does not require radical reinvention. It requires intentional design. Small changes accumulate. Structure compounds. Learning improves. Teaching to the brain transforms classrooms into environments where understanding stabilizes, retention increases, and learners develop capacity over time. Everything we've explored comes back to one central idea. Learning improves when instruction aligns with how the brain processes information. Cognitive load shapes attention. Memory design shapes retention. Neuroplasticity shapes growth. These are not abstract concepts. They are operating conditions. Every lesson either works with them or works against them. When instruction respects cognitive limits, learners process more deeply. When memory is designed intentionally, knowledge stabilizes. When challenge and feedback are structured well, capacity expands over time. This is the power of brain-based education. It shifts teaching from delivery to design. It shifts learning from exposure to understanding. It shifts outcomes from short-term performance to long-term capability. Why this matters now? Learning environments are becoming more complex. Digital tools, accelerated pacing, and increasing demands place sustained pressure on attention and memory. Educators operate at the intersection of knowledge and cognition. Instructional choices determine whether complexity becomes manageable or overwhelming. Neuroscience offers guidance at this moment because it explains the constraints and possibilities of learning clearly. When educators understand these principles, they gain leverage. From insight to action. The most effective changes are often structural rather than dramatic. Simplifying presentation. Sequencing content deliberately. Embedding retrieval. Spacing learning across time. Designing challenge intentionally. Using technology with purpose. These choices accumulate. Over time, they reshape learning environments. Teaching becomes more predictable in its outcomes. Learners develop confidence through competence. Retention increases because understanding stabilizes. A shift in educational focus. Brain-based teaching encourages a shift in priorities. From covering content to consolidating knowledge. From delivering information to designing learning. From measuring performance to building capacity. This shift does not reduce rigor. It channels effort toward outcomes that endure. Education becomes a system that develops learners rather than tests them repeatedly. Your role moving forward. Every educator influences cognitive conditions daily. The question to carry forward is simple. How does this lesson interact with attention, memory, and effort? That question transforms planning, instruction, and assessment. It turns neuroscience into a practical lens rather than a distant discipline. Call to action. Choose one upcoming lesson. Refine it with cognitive clarity. Reduce unnecessary load. Build in retrieval. Allow time for consolidation. Observe how learners respond. Then repeat. Small, consistent alignment produces meaningful change. Brain-based strategies are not one-time interventions. They are design principles that strengthen with use. The broader impact. When learning environments respect how the brain works, outcomes extend beyond the classroom. Learners retain knowledge longer. They transfer skills more effectively. They approach challenges with confidence. At scale, these effects compound. Education becomes more resilient, adaptive, and effective in preparing learners for complexity. Closing. Neuroscience does not tell educators what to teach. It informs how learning unfolds. Teaching aligned with the brain strengthens understanding, retention, and growth. This alignment is achievable. It is practical. It is powerful. The future of education belongs to learning environments designed with cognitive reality in mind. That future begins with intentional design,